Well, good morning, everybody. We are back. It is another week for the show, and we're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. There you go. My little button wouldn't work early this morning. I'm getting it together. How are you?
Well, I can understand your button not working. It's Monday morning, and where I am, it's cold and gray and rainy, which I could have predicted because it's school holidays this week. So,
Oh my goodness. Well, my name it's not bad over here. It's a little it's a little chilly. It's fall chilly, but not too bad. My name is Brenda and I am one of two parts of this show. And next to me, that way,
yes, that way.
there we go, is Suzanne Lucas, also known as the evil HR lady.
I'm very
I know.
curious where you
We'll
are.
get it. We'll get it. And this is how you guys can find us out on social media and all sorts of other places. You guys are welcome to go ahead and connect with us. By all means, please do so. And we are here for yet another week of talking about HR stuff.
Yes, HR stuff, which we love. And our love of HR stuff is why we're always invited to the best parties. Sorry.
Notice they're not always terminating parties.
Yes, HR stuff is where it is at.
I'm saying
It's
all day.
always interesting, always interesting. And actually, we have interesting topics for today.
Yeah, absolutely. What is our topic for today, ma'am?
Well, our topic is something that applies to me every day and has applied to Brenda for the last month, which is remote working. And this is not just telecommuting. Telecommuting can be you live next door to the office or everybody is around and you telecommute. Sometimes you're in the office, sometimes or whatever. Remote working is when you're truly separate from other people in your company, or you're in a different state or a different country. And it's a lot more complicated behind the scenes than just saying to everybody, you can work at home right now during COVID, because they're all still in the same state, the same metro area, and they're still legally employed at the office where you are, or doing 3 days at home and 3 days, 2 days in the office or whatever. Remote work is really when you're separated, and a lot of businesses are going this way. Facebook came out and said that they were going to allow their employees to work from wherever. Some other big companies are saying the same thing. IBM used to have this model, then they brought everybody into the office, and now they're kicking everybody back out again. So I thought it might be a good time to discuss, now that Brenda's back in her home after her trip around the US.
My American walkabout.
American walkabout in a car. Yeah. And as we were chatting before, one of the things Brenda said to me was, oh, the time zones.
And I was early for everything. So while I was out and about doing my thing, I took to the road for a couple of reasons. Number one, I had some business to take care of, and I really didn't want to spend a lot of money flying around. So I took advantage of the opportunity to really just drive. And I spent 25 days out on the road. Nicole was with me in the back seat the whole time. I did great. And we hit, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 states we crossed.
Wow.
In 25 days. Yeah, it was pretty great. We had a lot of fun. And every, city and stop along the way, we had business to do. So it was pretty great. And but it was kind of crazy. I mean, you're in a situation like this, you're traveling with a limited amount of your personal belongings, and you get your rhythm down about how you pack the car, how you unpack the car. But it was good. And I'm digressing just a little bit because I do want to share this with you guys. What I saw out in the real world is nothing like what the media is sharing, to be honest with you. I mean, people are walking around using their masks, but you know what? I saw a lot of people living life. And I saw a lot of people, I didn't see as much, I hardly saw any political campaigning. I mean, just a handful of signs here and there. But it's not as trust me, the US is not nearly as contentious as the media wants you to believe. So that's the good news. That's one of the great things about getting out and about traveling for work. You meet great people, you see really awesome things, you see a different spin on life, and that comes with a cost, though. Your system is out of whack, and your schedule is out of whack, and we're people of habits, and so our habits are out of whack. And then when you get home, once you've developed a routine, then that routine's out of whack. So, it comes with it. But yeah, the changing of the time zones and trying to figure out, it's like, okay, when is this meeting that I'm supposed to do? And just, I was just always online early for just by accident. Makes it interesting.
It's the time zones are something that I struggle with a lot, being in Europe, and
Yep.
almost all of my clients are in the US. I have one client that's split between Amsterdam and Paris, which is the same time zone for me. But my US clients, it can become very, very difficult, especially when I'm dealing with people in California. It's a 9-hour time difference. And trying to find a time when we can both meet is is kind of difficult when you're 9 hours apart. And then sometimes I deal with people in India, and they're on the total opposite
Yeah.
side, and it can just become complicated.
Yep.
And one of the things that most of you listening probably don't know is daylight savings time, which is, we're coming back up on it, and everybody springs, we fall back. So we get an
Yeah.
extra hour.
We don't spring anywhere right now.
Not spring anywhere. Fall back, and Europe does daylight savings time, the US does daylight savings time, but they don't do it on the same day. And so every spring and every fall, there's a week in which suddenly I'm not 6 hours ahead of New York. I'm 5 hours, or I'm 7 hours, and I can never remember. I always have to calculate. And, um, you know, I've been doing these weekly webinars on reopening your business after COVID, and they're really great. And if you're interested, you can find them at Career Learning, or I'll have a link on my website. But when I was scheduling for that last week in October, when the time things are different, I was like, my brain was breaking, going, okay, wait, am I available at this time or not? Because,
Yeah.
the US audience. And it can be kind of complicated. I mean, it's not like world ending complicated, but it can be a little bit complicated. And most of what I do is sit behind a computer and write things, or sit behind a computer and give webinars. I don't do a whole lot of face to face, but in a lot of businesses, there's a need for a lot of meetings or a lot of phone calls where you're dealing with clients. And it may seem like a silly thing to worry about time zones when you're hiring. But when you think about it, we've set up the business day to match the school day, or the school day to match the business day, or whatever. So if you've got little kids and your client is in New York and you're in California, they're going to want to meet at that same time that you're trying to get your kids dressed and out of the house, or you got to take the kids to daycare, or even they want to meet at 9 o'clock Monday morning, which is 6 a.m. your time. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't allow remote workers because of time zones, but it is something that you need to consider. And the opposite is also true. Are you going to be willing to be on the East Coast and deal with people in California? So
Yep.
you're not going to be able to walk away from your computer at 5 o'clock. because it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon in California. And of course, depending on your job, that may or may not matter. But when you're thinking about allowing your workforce to be truly remote, time zones are actually really important. And you got to think through that.
Yep. And along with the time zone, you kind of rang a bell there too, because not only the people dealing with the time zones, but they're also dealing with time zones, and you said it too, the different school schedules too. So, like I have, we talk about this in every show. We have our unique groups, and sometimes I'll do live events with folks over in the Next Gen Women in HR group, but I have to be constantly thinking, it's like, it'd be great for me to bang something out at 10 o'clock, but my folks over on, who are over in California, and I got another person in Hawaii that's in this group, it's like, I have to push that back until sometime between 1 and 3 p.m. when I'm at my peak for, like, all my coaching calls and, other types of sessions that I teach, like you. And I have to figure out, when am I going to do that? Because I have to keep in mind what's going on over on the West Coast, not just here on the East Coast.
Yeah. And, and for me, I got to think globally. And,
right.
For some of that, that's an advantage. I do drive time radio quite a bit. And one of the reasons why they like me, besides my sparkling personality and my great knowledge, is that I am up and awake at 6 a.m., Connecticut time. I do a lot with the Connecticut station. They can call me 20 minutes before and say, hey, we had a cancellation. Can you come on? And I can, because it's noon for me.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was physically located on the East Coast, my phone, if you can call me at 5:30 in the morning, but it's not going to ring because I have it turned off, you're going to find that difficult to catch someone, whereas they can catch me. So there is that advantage that I have in terms of doing, the radio and stuff, which I love to do, the drive time radio. And that gives me an advantage. They don't have to schedule a day in advance because I'm already up. But that also has kept me from being able to do things in the evening, where I'm just like, I'm sorry, that's at 1 o'clock in the morning for me, and I love you, but I'm not going to go on your radio show at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that can
not
be
for an unpaid spot.
not for an unpaid spot. Yeah, you pay me and I'm right there. You betcha. But yeah, that's just not something that can happen. And these things are inconveniences, and you can work around them, and if people are clear on it. But there's some other aspects of having truly remote workers, and that's the legal side of things.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't like to think about that so much.
But we're going to.
But we're going to. For sure, we're going to. It's one thing to have somebody work from home during COVID, and everybody knows it's a thing going on, and it's not a big deal because they're still an employee of your location. But when we start making people permanently remote, and they're in a different state, or a different country, then we run into some problems.
Yep.
And they become an employee in that state. Suddenly they're subject to that state's laws. And that means for payroll purposes, for overtime purposes, for anything. So much of employment law is state-based. And, we have federal guidelines, we have federal law, and you have to comply with federal law, but a lot of states have stricter rules than the federal government. And now if you're working in that state, you're subject to those laws. And then you need to register your business in those states to make sure that everybody is paid properly, taxes are paid properly, and it can be a big pain in the patootie. Patootie is a technical term.
Patootie. Well, and there's one exception to this, what we're talking about, and I'm only going to speak on the international point of that. And that is if it's a federal contractor. And if you have somebody if you contract federally and you have expatriated individuals and they are working on a US base, then your international employment laws it doesn't happen. Then you still adhere to domestic US laws. But if you were to expatriate an employee to, let's say, for example, your Denmark facility, then everything that happens with that employee falls under Denmark's employment laws.
Yes, and that's something that people ask me a lot because I am an American. I work for American businesses most of the time, and I'm sitting here in Switzerland, and they're like, "I want to do that. Can I just, move with my company?" And the answer is generally no. And there's a lot of reasons for the answer being no. One of which is, how are you going to get a visa to the country that you want to go to? But assuming you can get a visa, to be an employee is different than to be a contractor.
Right.
And I am not an employee of anybody, of any of these people. I am a contractor and I'm paid as such. I have contracts. I have specific things that I am paid on. I have profit loss responsibility, so on and so forth, all the rules of contracting. And I pay my taxes here in Switzerland. I also have to pay US taxes, which sucks, but that's another topic altogether. Which we probably don't want to discuss because I get really ranty.
Nope, we're not going there.
About it. Brenda will hit me or something.
We're not going there.
But you can't just send an employee over to another country without registering your business in that country. And if you want to talk different rules, I mean, one of the things here in Switzerland is there is no such thing as at-will employment. Everybody is under contract. And you can terminate someone, but depending on their contract, you have to give them either 3 or 6 months notice. And here's a fun fact. It's 3 calendar months or 6 calendar months, not 90 days or 180 days. So if you're in Switzerland and your boss sets you up a meeting on the 30th with you and HR, call in sick, and don't answer your phone and then go on the next day because that gives you a whole extra month of severance. But that's Suzanne's little trick for getting fired in Switzerland. But when somebody wants to be an employee in another country, suddenly they're subject to all of those laws and you have to register your business there. So I tell people, it may be possible for you to continue as a contractor with your company, but certainly not as an employee. I mean, even if you're authorized to work in whatever country that you're in, if they're not a registered business there, they're not going to want to go through that hassle of the paperwork. I mean, it's one thing to set up the paperwork for New Jersey when you're in Pennsylvania, but it's a whole other ball of wax to set up France when you're in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to happen. You're not that great of an employee. And so when people come, you may want to say, "Oh, I would really love to keep you on as an employee, but it can't do it. It can't do it."
It gets really complicated when you talk about internationally. I mean, it's even complicated just domestically here in the United States. So, for instance, I know somebody who has sought refuge in the mountains of West Virginia as we've been, going through this whole COVID pandemic from here in Virginia. Well, he is classified, and you have to remember that not every state has reciprocity between the two states. And in a situation like where we are right now, is it possible that an employee could be working elsewhere? And they've, been converted to a work from home environment and they're now working elsewhere. And the answer is yes, that's true. But you have to understand the lived in, worked in scenario that's also taking place. So this gentleman that I know, he's been since March, he's been residing in West Virginia. And even though maybe that's not his legal physical address, that's where he's physically has been. And he's a Virginia employee. Well, at some point in time, the company is going to be forced with asking the question, okay, so how are we going to tax this guy? Because he's been physically taking shelter and refuge in West Virginia, but he's classified as lived in, worked in, and here in Virginia. And we're not set up to be a West Virginia employer. So one of two things happens. Either the company becomes a West Virginia employer, and now the lived in, worked in changes. So he, works in West Virginia, lives in West Virginia, and therefore, falls under the West Virginia tax code. But then the question is, do you have to follow West Virginia employment laws? And the answer is yes. So you have to set yourself up for sit and SUI over there. So, SIT stands for sales income tax, and SUI stands for state unemployment insurance. And so, I mean, I'm kind of going through this right now. I've got 2 LLCs that I'm building on top of, everything else that I've got going on. And I need to establish both of these LLCs as employers in Virginia and in Illinois, because that's the situation. So I can't classify the people that are going to be on payroll, even though the home base is going to be here in Virginia. I can't classify them as Virginia employees because they are working and living in Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and these are things that you may not know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that's advertised, and you don't see it talked about a lot when people talk about telecommuting. And there's this idea that telecommuting is going to solve all of our problems and everybody can go live where it's cheap, or, if you're young and hip or whatever, you can go move to the young hip places, wherever those young hip places are. It's not that easy. And businesses need to be aware of where their employees are living. If they're going to say, okay, look, you can be remote forever. And, in a lot of places, I spent almost 10 years living on the border of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and Pennsylvania is a heck of a lot cheaper. And so almost our whole neighborhood worked in New Jersey, and that's fine. But if everybody in that neighborhood has been working at home since March, and their businesses have now decided that's it, we're just going to do permanent work from home, then you've got to classify those people as Pennsylvania employees. And they were all on pharmaceuticals, so it doesn't really matter because pharma is everywhere. But if they were working for a smaller business that's not located in all of these different states, it can be a big pain. And I know a lot of our listeners are small business HR people, and this may not be on your radar, and it may not be on the radar of the company president or owner or whatever either. We don't think about it a lot because there's no border guards or whatever when you cross state lines, and we go shopping in other states, and we work in other states and all of that all of the time. A lot of people live on borders. There's a lot of population around those things. It's something you have to consider now. Yeah. If you're going to make this a permanent thing, it's something you've got to consider. And is it worth it? It may well be, but is it worth it for you to register in all 50 states? Probably not. If you've only got 25 employees, you don't want to be in 25 different states. You probably want to limit your recruiting to a specific geographic area that you're registered in, so that you can have all of your I's dotted and T's crossed.
Yeah.
You don't want to end up in court because you're caught off guard.
Yep.
And
those conversations that you need to have with your employees aren't going to be easy. I mean, like if you look at the gentleman, the example that I provided, the West Virginia situation, it's like, how are you going to have that conversation with that person? It's like, listen, I can't have you working in West Virginia anymore. You either have one or two options. You either, we set ourselves up it doesn't cost anything to set you up as an employer for that state, but you also have to be familiar with the state laws. You have to work with your HRIS system or your accountant or the CPA or whoever, So that way, 941s are being filed appropriately. Does it add more work? Yes. And is there a benefit to accommodating somebody in a situation like this? Sure, there is. But what happens if they want to go, to Montana, or if they want to go up to Idaho and you're operating down in Florida? Well, that changes everything. We've already talked about, the time zone difference thing, but now you're really talking about, it could be a top performer in your company, but what happens if you have a low performer in your company who's that raging pain in the butt and you don't want to make the same accommodation? Hey, Brenda's number one rule in HR kicks in here. What you do for one, you do for all. So if you're not accommodating or are willing to accommodate other people relocating to other states and in their eyes ideally be able to do the same job somewhere else for the same amount of money, but yet still be closer to family, or they just want to relocate and find just a change of season, so to speak, and chapters in their life open and shut, then you have to be willing to do that for everybody. So could you potentially be in 25 states if you allow this? Yeah, you really could. And do you have the bandwidth to understand what are the requirements for all 25 states? Let's say, for example, you have somebody who wants to move to California.
Then you just cry
Oh
and say no.
boy, what's that?
I said you cry and you say no. It's been lovely to have you work for us, but don't you dare cross that border, because California is wackadoodle when it comes to employment law.
It's a very complicated state. So the states of like California, Washington State, Oregon, New York, New Jersey, a little bit on the Rhode Island, but definitely Massachusetts. All of those states have very unique laws, and you have to really truly understand what they are, or you will get yourself hung up very easily.
And it's a serious issue. Now, I'm not as strict on the what you do for one, you do for all rule as Brenda is, because I think you can argue that for a high performer, we can treat you differently than a low performer, as long as you have everything documented. But you are going to run into problems if the first person that asks you say yes, they're white. The second person asks you say no, they're black. You may say, well, it's because of performance or whatever. But if you don't have that so incredibly well documented, you're going to lose in court. And if that person goes public on Twitter and it happens to go viral, you're going to lose in the court of public opinion. And I hate that we have to look at the court of public opinion, but right now it's something that you've got to think of. I'm not saying that you should have let mob rule. You absolutely shouldn't, but you need to think, how is this going to play?
Yeah.
How is this going to play out? So it's okay to set boundaries and say, look, you can move to the surrounding states. We have no problem registering in all the states that border the one we're here in, but that's it. Or you need to stay in this time zone, or whatever those rules are. You've got to really think about it and think about how much this person contributes and how much you're willing to get involved in dealing with this. And you don't have to do it all your own. One of the great things about outsourcing, this is a place where outsourcing can work really well for you. If you want to outsource your payroll to a company that's set up for national payroll, that can make it a lot easier. One of the things in Pennsylvania is you have to pay not only state taxes, but you have to pay city taxes. And so I don't know how many cities there are in Pennsylvania, but there's a lot.
It's complicated.
It can get complicated. And so you need to have someone doing your payroll that knows that. And maybe your local payroll guy that you've used for 20 years and who's amazing and knows every ins and out of your state's payroll laws. Great. But as soon as you have an employee in Pennsylvania, does this guy know about there's city taxes that need to be withheld? Chances are he doesn't. I can't tell you what states have city taxes. I have no idea. I mean, I know that there's some states without state income tax. Texas and Nevada, I believe, don't have state income tax. That's awesome. But I think all the other states do, and you've got to make sure that everything is right. So this is where outsourcing some of these things can really be a benefit to your company. If you want to let people go to other states, I'm absolutely supportive of remote work. As I said, I've done it. I do it. I love it. But it's complicated and you need to be on top of that. So hire an outsourcer, there's several companies, and Paychex, Paylocity, there's a whole bunch that do it.
Yeah.
And, check out their prices, and it may be worth it to you to do that. They can also tend to be able to provide some guidance on some state laws. But like Brenda was saying, when she listed those states, they're complicated and the laws are different. It's not like California, Oregon, and Massachusetts all have the same laws. They all have different complicated laws. And so that's something that you really need to have in mind when you're going to allow your employees to do this. And, my strong preference would be that it wasn't so complicated, and that you could just have anybody work wherever they wanted to, and we could just go global. And wouldn't that be great?
But they didn't ask us.
Nobody asks my opinion. Why?
But the good news is that here in a second, we get to ask each other's opinion.
That's true.
So we can do that now.
All right.
All right.
I asked this last time, so you can ask this.
Yep. Okay. So you ready?
I'm ready.
This is a question that is coming from the perspective of an employee.
Okay.
And for the folks that who've never joined us before, we do this. Suzanne and I ask each other a question, and we don't know what the question is. We're totally unprepared. We have no idea what's coming at us. So,
no idea.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay. So, how can I report an inappropriate workplace behavior in an establishment that doesn't have a true HR department?
This is something that comes up a lot.
Yes, it does.
It comes up a lot. And the question is who is committing the inappropriate behavior? And if it's a coworker, that's pretty easy. You go to your boss. And if you're not comfortable, you go to your boss's boss, all the way up to the owner or the CEO, depending on the organization. The problem comes into play when it's the big boss, when it's the owner, when it's the CEO. Then what do you do? And there are some options. Depending on what it is. If it's something that's not illegal, but just obnoxious, like generalized bullying, that he's just a jerk. But if he's an equal opportunity jerk, that's just, sorry, bad luck. You can always go to someone in your reporting line, go to the VP or whatever and be like, Bill is a jerk. What can I do? But if it's Bill who's sexually harassing you, you can certainly go to that person, but they don't have any power over the CEO either. If you have a board of directors, which some businesses do and some do not, but if you have a board of directors, you can report it to the board, especially in the nonprofit sector. Nonprofits, that tends to be the place to go. You can also report it to a government agency. If you're being sexually harassed, you can go to the EEOC. If you've got a pay issue, you can go to the Department of Labor. And I have always said these people are being really slow. The EEOC is very slow to respond. But lately, this summer, they have been on fire. And I mean, they've been dealing a lot with COVID-related cases. But I hate to praise the government. It goes against my moral code, but they've really been on top of things. So I absolutely would recommend if somebody is doing something illegal, to report it there. And the option is always available to spruce up your resume, find a new job, and leave. There are things that you're never going to fix. And especially if it's coming from the top, if it's coming from the CEO, you're not going to fix it. It's not going to happen. And you may find that it's better for you to find something else and go. But anything below the CEO level, go to your boss, or your boss's boss, or a neighboring manager as well. Sometimes that's to do. But you can always report illegal behavior to the relevant government agency. And if you don't know which government agency it is, you can Google, how do I report sexual harassment? How do I report racial discrimination? How do I report an ADA violation? And their answer will pop up and give you guidance on that. So that is what I would tell you to do. You can also hire an attorney. But
all things employers should know that are available to their employees. All of these options are perfect. So as you know, if you're an employer listening in, the reason why I throw questions out there that come from the perspective of an employee is that I think you guys should know what questions employees are actually asking out there. And this is a perfect example of some guidance that they would receive from somebody or would go out and seek. And then how do you turn around and protect yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, these are real life things that come up. They're real life. And, I had a friend the other day make an offhand comment of, this guy came in and brought his resume, said he was looking for a job, and the job would require a significant amount of training. As a matter of fact, 3 years of training. And he said, and so I was just like, I don't want to hire someone that's going to be ready to retire right after they're done with their training. And I freaked out on him. I'm like, it's age discrimination. You can't do that. What are you thinking? And he's like, chill. And then he said, we have fewer than 15 employees anyway.
Yeah.
He said we also weren't hiring, so it wasn't a matter of discrimination. But he knew what was up. And he knows me well. But it's something that you as an employer need to be on top of those things, because somebody looking for a job, they have time to Google, and they're going to find those things out. I have a question along a similar vein for you.
Cool,
Brenda. And this is an employee coming into HR asking what they can do.
Okay.
Which is, let me pull up on my phone the question. I am writing you to complain about one of our employees, and then she names the employee, which is not necessary. When you email me, people, I don't need to know the names of your employees.
Wait, she's complaining about an employee, or an employee is complaining about
an employee.
All right, she's complaining. Okay, got it.
So this person's complaining about an employee.
Okay, is this an HR person?
No, this is an employee talking to HR.
Oh, okay, got it.
I'm asking you a question as an HR person.
Okay.
Early in the morning after my night shift, she bullies me. She's not tolerant of me and finds fault on a national basis. She told me I need to speak English. After a busy night, I am very stressed out and I need to take time off. What can I do?
Read that again.
I edited to keep out something. So I'm writing a complaint about one of our employees. Early in the morning after my night shift, she bullies me. I get the idea that this is the day employee coming in, taking over for the night employee. And so she bullies him. She's not tolerant of me and finds fault in me on a national basis. This English here is a little bit.
On a national basis?
I'm assuming that it's a country of origin, a national origin thing.
Okay.
Because the next line is, she told me I need to speak English.
Okay.
And then she says that she's very stressed and can't sleep and needs to take time off. So, Brenda, the HR lady, I have just come to you and told you Another employee is bullying me about my country of origin and telling me to speak English. What do I
Go.
do?
So the first thing as an employer, if I were the HR person in that seat, is that the first thing you have to do is you have to control the environment. And you need to launch an investigation. So you need to determine what has been going on, what has not. So in these situations, I refer to them as the instigator and the offender until I know more, because there's always two sides to every story, and the truth lies somewhere in between. So, or I should say, the aggrieved and the offender. So, it's important that you control the environment. That's the first thing. So, if you're in a situation, it sounds like this is a manufacturing environment, and more than likely, there's going to be more than one person that's capable of running whatever machine or working in the area that the accused is actually working on. But you want to separate the two of them. And so that could mean that, the person who's filing the complaint is moved temporarily to another area and working and doing something different where there is no contact between the two, or you put both of them on an administrative leave pending the outcome, the outcome of the investigation. And you can pay them or you cannot pay them. There's nothing out there that says that you have to do either. You can certainly permit them to use their PTO if you're not going to pay them. But the goal of that is to make sure that the situation doesn't grow between the two of them. And then number two is the situation isn't complicated by either one of them if they talk, because people talk. And every time somebody says, hey, I need you to say this confidentially, somebody goes off and tells somebody else about it. And so it's just the nature of people. We don't hold things in confidence as we promise, especially in today's world. So that's the first thing. Then, you need to make sure that you get all of the full details. You really have to dig in, and you have to do a lot of critical thinking with the person that has registered the complaint. And if they've listed any names as potential witnesses, you have to go talk to them. And then along the way, you have to have the conversation with the other person who's being accused. And this is not a situation where this individual is entitled to face their accuser. Don't believe that. If you're into watching courtroom drama or military drama, this is not a situation where you want to put your employees in front of each other and confront each other. Not unless you are ready for a massive cat fight. Or it is going to get really, really bad, and you're actually instigating the issue. You need to control the environment, and that is by keeping separation between the employees who are involved. And so what makes it even more complicated, we've kind of talked about this in previous episodes, is that under National Labor Relations Act, you cannot tell an employee, keep this confidential, because that's a violation of their protected rights. What you can tell employees is, as you're investigating, is that we, as the company, are considering this confidential. And that will therefore kind of infer that you shouldn't be talking about this, right? But you can't just come out and say you can't talk about this. So you gotta be careful of that. Once you find out all the facts, then you have to talk to the accuser or the one who's being accused and get their side of the story. Once you have all of that, it's going to go one of two ways. You're either going to be scratching your head going, and you need to, you're going to learn a lot of information. You're going to learn a lot of things. There's no doubt. And a lot of that could mean that you have to sort some additional information out. And you probably are going to have a conversation with your employment attorney about it, especially on how this was done. If there was any type of egregious act that was broadcast on social media, that's got to be reined in. If the accuser who's done this to more than one person, then you have to find out where your liabilities lie and what your options are, and what your employment attorney is going to say, well, you need to squash this. And at some point, somebody's probably either going to get terminated or given a corrective action as a final. And then you have to go back and loop and have those conversations again. So you discipline if the person was found to have done this, and you have to, discipline that person. If the person said, I'm sorry, you need to speak English, meaning who knows? Is the other woman who's making the complaint, is she speaking half English, half Tagalog, for instance? And I mean, I have family members who are from the Philippines, and they speak half English and half Tagalog all at the same time. And I mean, we've heard the movie Spanglish. Some people, it's easy to mix language up if you're not used to saying it, right? So is what's the nature of the situation, and how much of it will actually require some. There's going to be a requirement of conversations to be taken in and given out, and the ones that are being given out are going to be the ones about, you need to be mindful. You can't do this anymore. And y'all have to figure out how to get along, those kinds of things. And if somebody's just being an absolute turd, then, that's going to make the situation a lot easier. It'll be more directive versus like, hey, listen, you don't have to buy in. You don't have to like work to get buy-in. You just lay it right on out there. So it's at the end of the day, in a situation like this, it's just going to be a lot of work, and it's good work for a company, but it's gonna be a little bit of a time suck until you can actually put through that, because not everybody is nice, and not everybody thinks about other people, and how their existence impacts one another, and the things that they think and they say, and that's just the consequence of human beings.
I like what you said about how not everybody is nice. And this is one of my flaws, is that I'm a nice person and I just assume other people are nice too. And I'm shocked repeatedly when people are not nice, but some people are not nice. And it's also a good reminder, when you said about talking, half Tagalog, half English, we throw German words into our conversations. We speak English at home, but we all speak German too. So, we're always throwing in German words and adding, I'm always using a German verb, but adding English endings. So, which is fine. My kids understand it, but it would be super annoying if
Somebody else.
um, but it's a good reminder to employers as well that you can't prohibit people from speaking their native language unless it's a safety situation, or you're in a meeting, everybody in the meeting needs to be speaking the same
Right.
language. But in the hallway at lunch, two employees that are folding laundry together that have the same language, they can chat in whatever language they would like to chat in, and that's really important. You can't demand that everybody speak English all the time, or Spanish, or whatever the language is of your company. Those things are really important. But I love how your answer just was like, this is not as simple as smacking someone on the hand, because you don't know from that question everything that's going on.
Yep.
You don't. And it's such a good reminder that we need to approach, as HR, we need to approach these things from a non-biased standpoint. Just because the first person to come in to complain, isn't always the right party.
That's right.
And there may be a huge history between these two. Who knows? You got to investigate.
Exactly. So that's
excellent.
a good question. Yeah, this is a good chat today. So we are excited to have you guys back for next week. But before we go, we actually have two groups that we both lead, and I think it would be awesome if we got a chance to share with you what those are. Suzanne, you want to go first?
Sure. You can join me over on Facebook at Evil HR Lady, and we discuss all things HR and business, and any funny HR based memes that you can find as well. Lighten it up. It is a public group, so I do like to warn people about that. So don't post about how much you hate your boss, because your boss could see it. But if you have a question that you need help with, we're there for you. If there's a question that you want to post that you don't want your boss to know, you can email me and I will post it for you. And it's really handy for people that are an HR department of one, because it's really a bunch of your coworkers that can help you sort through, and you won't meet a more helpful and kind group of people. So welcome to join us at Evil HR Lady on Facebook.
And then I have a group that is called the Next Gen Women in HR, and similar premise. We're here to help each other out, but we also do some pretty, we have fun events. The group actually was part of, I don't know if I've told you this or not, but we won a Bronze Stevie Award for Best Business Startup in the Women in Business competition recently, and this group is very much a part of that. So we celebrated last week, which was a lot of fun. But we give different webinars and seminars, and we share resources and tools and information, and it's a fun place to go. And we're young still. We're not even a year old, and we have over 200 members. I almost said employees. 200 members. 200 members in the group, and they're just a really, really great bunch of people, and I certainly enjoy spending a lot of time with all of them. They're just awesome. Love them to death. So we are going to be back again next week. So yeah, thanks for joining us, guys, and thanks for following. If you find this interesting, somebody who's in the HR field or a manager that can get some useful information out this, tag us, share the link, put us on social media, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
We will see you next week.